and I wanted to share my experience in building both B2C, B2B companies, and primarily would love for this to be a conversation. As much as I love my own voice, would love for you guys to interrupt me and ask me questions. So let me start with a quick intro. So as mentioned, I've been lucky enough to found some companies with some incredible people as partners. My first company was Ambient Technologies. It was a company that was basically trying to bring the Jetsons to life. Does anyone know the Jetsons? Have you heard of this cartoon? It used to be like 2 decades ago maybe. It was a version of like people living in the future and robots helping you, and I was like, holy cow, this is super cool. So I graduated from engineering, and I graduated with a 2.7 GPA, and I was in line for getting a job, and I remember the guy in front of me was like, hey, I have a 3.96, and the recruiter was like, what happened to that 0.04? I was like, shit, I'm not getting a job anytime soon, so let me go and do something else. And I was in love with this concept of, like, imagine your house could help you without you having to think about or learn technologies. Like, how cool would that be? And so, didn't have a job, so I went and started a company, took a loan from a bank. They were kind enough to give me a loan, so that was my first 100,000 raise. Built that out. Was a really tough 2 years. Hardware is a really tough business for anyone thinking about getting into it. Luckily that was acquired by a company in India, which was then acquired by Microsoft, and it went on to be part of Microsoft Homes from there. Cool Iris was the next one that I started. Cool Iris was basically trying to change the way that we browse content. I'll tell you more about that later. Caprese was my most recent one. Not a unicorn yet, but I hope it will be soon enough. And then I'm currently working on Pulse. All in all, I've raised from Andreessen Horowitz, from Kleiner Perkins, from Y Combinator, from True Ventures, you name it. I've basically raised money from them. We've raised over $100 million in my 15-year career, and we've given most of it back and then some. But this is just to show you some of the stuff that I've built. These are some of the companies that I'm involved in, either as an investor or as an advisor. If you don't know some of them, you should download it. Wib, Empowerly. I'll call out a couple. Brightwheel is doing super cool stuff. It's like Salesforce, but for schools. And they're doing a phenomenal job. As one of my friends is the CEO there. And then Verto is super cool as well. They're actually based in New York. I'm an investor there and an advisor. And they basically are Uber for luggage storage. And it sounds like it's not much of an opportunity there, but they're crushing it, doing really well. So what I want to share with you guys now is, I'm also a dad. I have 2 beautiful daughters, so I love the number of women in this classroom. It used to literally be like 0 when I was at McGill, so this is actually awesome to see. All right, so what I'll talk about is these topics in particular. One is how to kick off a business. What does day 0 look like? 2, how do you launch without actually building a product? Because it's super expensive to build a product, both in terms of time it takes as well as how much it costs. 3 is equity conversations and difficult conversations in general. 4 is when, not how. We'll talk about the how later. Maybe if you guys have me back, we can cover the how. But when to raise capital. And the last one is B2B versus B2C. Obviously, that's given the current topic you guys are talking about. First of all, how many of you want to do a startup? All right, decent number. So that's pretty promising. This should be relevant. So the question that I get all the time is, what is the thing that's common in all the startups I've worked with and everyone that's been successful? And honestly, there's no pattern. There are 2 things that stand out. All right. Having said there's no patterns, there's 2 things that stand out. 1, the founders need to be juggernauts. Do you guys know what this word means? Juggernauts? Juggernaut is actually in the X-Men, it's a comic character where once he starts running, nothing can stop him, and he's just going to bulldoze his way through it. And every single founder that I've worked with that's been successful is a juggernaut. I'll give you one example. Manoramic, a friend of mine from Wharton who started this, he basically ran out of cash 4 times in a row. For 6 months, he went without paying his employees, kept them motivated, went on to sell the company, went on to now become one of India's youngest billionaires. And the entirety of what made him successful was he was a juggernaut. He would not take no for an answer, and he would not stop no matter what it takes. And that kind of passion only comes when you truly believe in the mission of what you're working on. If you're doing this for the glory, if you're doing this for the money, That will come, but not until you've been through hell and back. So you better be ready for that. All right? So that's the first pattern that I see is people need to be super passionate. You need to wake up feeling, living, breathing your product and your service and your company and go to sleep with the exact same sentiment. Number 2 is the ability to actually tell stories really well. And I'll talk about that a little bit. But all of these people, I would say all, most of these people that are successful are just incredible storytellers. You need to be a really good storyteller. You need that for recruiting, you need that for fundraising, you need that for selling, you need that for PR. PR is to get basically in the press. You need this for everything. If you're fundamentally not able to get your audience excited about what you're doing, you're dead in the water. You might as well stay home and continue to refine that pitch and not worry about building a product. Because until you have the story, you have nothing. Those are the 2 patterns that I see. All right? One thing to be conscious of, when you guys do a startup, what you should not be thinking of, and you guys talked about this a little bit, is I'm going to launch Instagram style, this is going to be amazing, and like 18 months later, I'm going to come out with like $100 million, life's going to be awesome. More realistically, you're going to do this for the next 7 years, especially if you raise capital, right? So be in it for the long term. This is not like an 18-month journey. Do not go in with that mindset or you're setting yourself up for failure. Think, I'm going to do this for the next 5 to 7 years of my life. And in that calculation, think about what you're leaving behind, because you better be sure you want to do this. All of you will have the earning potential of making 200K maybe on average over the next 5 to 7 years. You're talking about maybe $1.5 million to $2 million that you'll be losing by not working and doing a startup instead. I'm not trying to scare you guys. I'm trying to make you understand you better be committed to this. And for you to see value in this, you better 10x that. That means your company would be worth maybe $100 million for you to make 20 million from that. All right? So just think about that, know that, and be very, very comfortable with that walking into your startup. All right, so let's talk about things to do when you get started. So first story is the company story, and the second story is the user story. Before I get into this, any questions on patterns or any comments from what you guys have seen? Yes?
What was your thought when you had a like 2.7 GPA and you said, I'm kind of forced to do a startup? So
Yeah.
how did that
You know, that's a good question. I didn't share this with my parents, of course. They were in India, so I was lucky enough to be remote in Montreal by myself. And I also had a lot of like really good friends supporting me. So that part was helpful. But my thought process was, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. And luckily at that point, I had a friend that was doing a startup, and he said, well, listen, you can always start a company, and the experience you will get and the kind of advantage you'll have over other applicants going for a job later will just be 10x, because you will have done sales and operations and marketing and product and engineering and pretty much everything it takes to get a company from zero all the way to up and running. So even if it goes nowhere, the experience you'll have is far greater than you doing some sort of like random job somewhere. So that was the mindset I went in with, and then I realized, well, I actually love this stuff too, so it worked out. But yeah, it was tough coming out of that, for sure. And it's sort of a conscious decision as well, because a lot of it was, I loved certain courses and got like pretty good grades in those, and I hated other courses and I got like repeat Fs in those, so not a fun journey, but I enjoyed it. All right, so back to company story. Like I said, company story is basically what will help you raise money, right? A big part of what makes Y Combinator successful and the hoopla around YC is what they do in the last week of YC, not the first 3 months of YC. All right, so YC, if you don't know, is an accelerator locally called Y Combinator. They actually fund a ton of companies. It used to be like 50 exclusive companies, and now the most recent batch that just came out was 200 companies, so not as exclusive, but still pretty cool. Their success in how quickly they're able to get companies to raise capital purely is based on how they train you for storytelling. And I'll give you guys a few examples of how much of a difference this makes and how well YC and other companies train you to do this. So the 3 things to keep in mind in all stories is, what are your pillars? And we'll talk about what this is. how do you actually make this a performance? And then lastly, practicing the crap out of it. All right, I think all good things come in threes, so you'll see that in my slides. The first thing is, what are the 3 pillars that are important to you, right? The 3 pillars, for example, for me, anytime I try and raise money for my company is, I'm awesome. I have like an awesome team and background. I've been there, done that, and I use that to my advantage. 2 is, hey, this market is huge. It is a ginormous market, and even if a company does meaningfully, like a little bit well, it's actually going to make a lot of money. And the 3rd pillar is, I don't know, pick a third. Maybe it's traction. I've launched something. I have some customers. Maybe I know something about this space that no one else does. Maybe there's some proprietary technology. But anytime you tell a story about your company, have the 3 pillars down. In Y Combinator, that's known as vertebrae. What are the things that will make your story stand up and people to pay attention to it versus just collapse and die out? Performance. Anytime I actually do this, this being pitch, I actually write down everything I'm about to say, including things like, hey guys, how's it going? And I rehearse it every single time. Reading it 5 to 10 times makes a huge difference because then what you're focused on is performance. Delivery, how much energy you have, how you convey this makes a big difference to how much people believe you. You can stand in one place and say, hey, I'm building the next Uber for da-da-da. Nobody's going to care. The passion with which you actually come on stage and talk to the 1,000, 2,000, 200, whoever's listening to you is really critical. Make sure you guys have that as well. And lastly is, of course, practice makes perfect. Anytime I do this, YC, for example, we rehearsed, I want to say probably close to 100 times before we went on stage and presented in front of 4,000 investors, and it paid off. Because again, by the 100th time, you're not thinking about the words you're using, you're purely focused on performance, and the whole thing is almost muscle memory at that point. Cool, Iris. Yes?
Sorry, quick question.
Yes?
I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
No, please don't.
Let's say I would tell you, if I'm an investor right now,
Yeah.
and I say, pitch for me an idea.
Yeah.
Could you please demonstrate to us how those 3 play out?
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, my name is Mayank. I've founded 4 companies in the past. 3 have been acquired. 1 is currently valued at $250 million and growing really well. I joined those teams from 0 and grew that all the way to sales of over $20 million. The idea that I have is to be able to actually take endpoint security and make that something that's not been possible before. Endpoint security, as everyone knows here, is a $3 trillion market. Companies are investing a tremendous amount. When they get breached, they lose customers. And what we've come up with is an idea to actually make sure that you will never get breached again. And to make sure that I'm not just making this up, we've actually done 100 customer interviews, and 18 of them have already signed up to become customers with us the minute we have the product ready to go. We're raising $2 million on a 10 million cap. Awesome. But, that's thank you. I paid him to ask that question, so. But I think the idea is, pick your 3 vertebrae. Pick the 3 things that are important to you that will make for a compelling story and rehearse that. I don't know how great or not that was, but be confident in the 3 that you pick and just go with it. And I'll talk a little bit more about the pillars, but I'll tell you the Cool Iris story. Cool Iris is actually not even that great of a product. I mean, I built it. I'm super proud of it, but it was a browser extension. All we did was say, wouldn't it be cool if there was window shopping online? When you're walking by a store, let's say Gap, or whatever you guys are shopping at nowadays, I don't know, you stop in front of the window and you can see inside and you can judge for yourself whether this shop is worth going to. But you cannot do that for links. When you click on a link, you don't know what you're about to see, and only after clicking do you realize, holy shit, there's so much spam, there's pop-ups everywhere, there's ads that I don't want to see, the content is useless, this sucks, let me go back. And then you try and hit back and it keeps forwarding you somewhere else and you're like, oh my God, this is terrible. Cool Iris was a really simple idea. What if you could just hover on the link, see the content without having to navigate to that page? All right? With that idea, we raised, no jokes, $40 million. Okay? That didn't happen because we were able to build a browser extension. That happened because of the story we were able to tell. Fundamentally, a lot of other things went right as well, but the story was huge in this. The story that we said was, the browser has really been the same. You think about Netscape Navigator, if you guys have even heard of this company, that was the first browser, and Google Chrome today. Nothing is different. People are still using stop, forward, back, refresh, and an address bar. Are you joking? The type of content has gone dramatically from being text-heavy into being media-rich. People are browsing Instagram and videos and photos, and you still want me to do stop, forward, back, refresh? Cool Iris is creating a new browser, and it's going to change the way that people interact with content, and that's the story that Kleiner Perkins said, holy shit, here's your first check, and we went on to raise $40 million. All right, that's the power of storytelling and how much of a difference it makes and how you position the same product. We have a browser extension, we're building a whole new browser. Okay, make sense? So Cool Iris, just so you guys know the end of the story here, we went on to become a top 10 website globally, and then we were acquired. The product is now called Yahoo Messenger. If you guys have heard of this company, it's no longer relevant, but yeah. Caprese. Okay, so Caprese, again, another example of a story that is really powerful. First of all, the founders of Caprese, amazing. I wish I was one of them. I was just an early employee there. These guys built a company that sold for $5 billion to HP. They built a B2B business, and the founder literally spent the first few months just sleeping in his car because he didn't have enough money to pay. And now he has a side story. He has a membership to a golf course that he forgets about sometimes, and he pays $200,000 a year for this. And literally he was like, oh yeah, shit, I'm a member there. Why don't we go there and have some fun today? And I was like, what are you talking about? How did you forget spending $200K? Anyways, good for him. So this story started with, we're going to take all of these applications that were built before mobile came around, right? Everything that was built for the desktop, these boring B2B applications like Salesforce and SAP and Oracle, the things that run fundamentally all core businesses, and we're going to bring them to mobile. And we're going to do this in a way that requires zero coding. And that was interesting, but not that interesting. Instead, the story became, can you imagine a world where people are not able to get work done on mobile? Think about how left behind your company is going to be if every single employee, partner, and customer is not able to get work done on mobile. If that's the company you want to become, you might as well shut down shop right now. Because the future is mobile. The future is every single employee needs to be enabled to do more than email and calendar. That story got Andreessen Horowitz's attention. That story enabled us to raise $80 million. And that story is why Caprese is worth $250 million today. Last one I'll tell you guys is Pulse. That's what I'm working on now. Pulse is fundamentally a survey platform. All right, surveys are super boring. Nobody cares about them. Everybody hates surveys. It's like a 20-minute thing with a chance to win $10. All of you have been there and done that. So why did we raise $4 million? How did we get into Y Combinator? A lot of it is luck. But fundamentally, I think it again was storytelling. What we said was, look, it turns out that if you want to ask a question for which the data exists, where do you guys go and ask questions online? Google, thank you. 10 points. Google. But turns out, if the data doesn't exist and the information is stuck in your head, how do you go and ask this question? Where do you guys go? There is nowhere to go. There is no place for you to go and extract data from someone's head and go and ask a really simple poll question without being this amazing SurveyMonkey user and setting up an account and paying $100 to ask some random people about whether or not they believe the death penalty should be. No, you should be able to pick up your phone, ask this question, and say, I want to know what 100 people in South Africa right now think about apartheid, and get that answer. How do you build a system that allows you to do that? Fundamentally, Google's unlocked all the information in the world that exists, is out there. How do you unlock the information that's stuck in people's heads? That's what got us the $4 million that we raised. That's what got us into YC and the storytelling around that. All right? I'm not going to bore you with my companies anymore, but I want you guys to take away that day zero of building your company is not building the product. In fact, that's not even day 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. You'll see day zero is building out your story. Because this story is not going to just help you raise a ton of money. It's going to get you your first sales. It's going to get you your first hires. It's going to make sure that when you wake up and you read the story on your wall when things are going badly and you're running out of cash, this is the story that's going to motivate you and keep you coming back. It's an amazing investment of your time. Do not take it lightly. Questions before I move on? No? Anyone want to tell me their story about their startup? Any volunteers? I do have a slide for... Oh, well, maybe I'll embarrass myself and I'll actually show you guys how we pitched YC. Is there a video I can play? Will this work? Do I have to press something fancy here? Oh, that's a pointer. Play. Hi everyone, my name is Mayank, this is Anand, and we are Pulse. We're crowdsourced Gartner. So, some of you already know this, but IT executives spend over $1 trillion buying products for their companies. And they do this largely based on analyst reports from firms like Gartner and Forrester and others. But after talking with hundreds of executives, we know they actually don't like these reports. In fact, they tell us these reports are pay-to-play and based on analyst opinions. Pulse creates better reports, and we do this without analysts. Our platform surveys thousands of IT executives who've been verified, and just like on Glassdoor, when they answer about what products they use, they instantly get a report of aggregate peer answers. Our reports are better because one, they're based on insights from people who know and use these products, and two, they're based on data, not opinions. We're already collecting information and data from over 3,000 executives representing amazing companies, and we're growing at over 100 companies every week. Gartner and the others make over $2.5 billion a year selling their reports. Our reports are free because we believe that selling information and data is a business model of the past. Instead, we're focused on a much bigger opportunity. We're creating a marketplace where IT executives and vendors can connect in this $1 trillion annual spend. I co-created Cool Iris, where Anand joined me to make it a top 10 website globally. And most recently, I was head of products at Caprese, where we successfully sold to hundreds of IT executives and understood their pain points very deeply. So to recap, we're Pulse, we're repeat entrepreneurs, we have 3,000 IT executives and are adding over 100 every week, and we're building the future marketplace where IT vendors and buyers can connect in this $1 trillion annual spend. Thank you. Sweet. So 6 months prior to this presentation, we'd struggled to raise, I think we'd raised like maybe $500,000. All right, so 500K, I was like, man, this is not going like anywhere. I need to really change things up here. YC fundamentally changed that for us. That storytelling rehearsal that we did for that last week, that 100 times, by the way, the first time they just ripped us into shreds. Michael Seibel, who was here, was one of the guys who was like, that is crap, go back and do this again. That was so helpful, because an hour after we finished this presentation, we had $1 million. And 2 weeks after we finished this presentation, we had $4 million. That is the power of storytelling. All right, so I think I've beaten that point enough. But if there are people that want to, this thing stopped working. I'm not sure if it still functions. Cool. But if there are people that want to rehearse their story or pitch their startup, anyone have startup ideas that you're working on? Side hustles?
I appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you do, whether it's post the class or later, hit me up on LinkedIn. Ping me anytime if I can be helpful in hearing your story out, hearing your idea out. I'm more than happy to. So the pillars that you can pick from are, generally speaking, these pillars. All right. So pick one of these three things, or three of these three things, or these three of these X things, and build your story from there. For sure, one of them has to be the team, Because fundamentally what people and investors, especially early stage, are betting on is this guy could be selling popcorn tomorrow. They're just going to make it work, right? They're betting on you as a person to be successful and to be that juggernaut more than anything else. Okay. I did have a slide about calling someone out and asking them, good luck, to call them out and ask them to do it, but I won't do that. I'm nice. So use case. All right. This is back to day zero. First company story, then user story. What is a user story? So everybody starts with, let's go build this product. I have mocks in mind. I'm going to build this thing out, especially if some of you are engineers, if not all of you are engineers. That's the first thing you guys will do. How many of you are in comp sci here? Or know how to code? Great. That is going to be held against you. Honestly, like you guys are the first one that is like, holy cow, can't wait to get my IDE going and let's just knock something out in React. Don't do it. Building a product is not the way to start building a product. It sounds weird, but it's truly not. You need to learn to launch a product without actually building the product. All right? There are lots of ways of doing this. This is step one. Read this. It's not too long. I'll stop talking for 30 seconds. Hopefully that'll be enough time. All right, I'm assuming you guys have read this. Anyone on why or how this is helpful in building a product? Any takers? The winners here so far with 10 points. Yes, you.
He sends out like a survey.
Yes.
To get data.
Yep.
And understand the market.
Yep.
Or his audience.
Yep.
Then he uses that to inform him what he needs to do.
Yep. Yep, exactly. So the story is, Lance is this HR guy. He sends out this quick survey without having to be a survey gizmo genius and comes back with the data very quickly and is able to make a decision. What this is hiding is what are all the things the product needs to do. This is fundamentally what the story is doing. Who is this for? It's for an HR manager. Awesome. You're not going to spend $100 just marketing to everyone who moves on Facebook. You're going to target by title and say, great, I'm going after HR managers first. Especially in a B2B business, this is mission critical. But regardless of B2B or B2C, you need to know who the hell you're building the product for. And unless you have a story that dictates that understands that, you're just going to build a product for yourself, and that's great, but you don't want one user. You want 1 million users, probably, or at least 100. Second thing, what is the use case? Why does the user care? How and where does this fit into their life? Really important. Features on how they're going to ask this. Features on how many they can ask. Feature on how quickly the data comes back. Feature on being able to share it. And finally, the emotional win that the user gets from being able to actually get the data and make a better decision. It's a really short paragraph, but it packs so much information and tells you so much about what to go build on day one when you're building the product. Don't get started without this. This is actually still missing a ton of stuff. How did Lance even get this app? Like, how did that journey even start? Maybe somebody shared a survey with him to start with? Not sure. 100 people. Well, what is the other side of that 100? How do they receive it? Over email? Over text? Do they have the app? There's so many assumptions based in there. Before he walks into the meeting, how does that happen? How quickly is the data coming back? What is the incentive on the other side? Why are people participating here? Lastly, is he picking industry? Like, is he shooting it out to 100 people randomly? Can you select by title, by whatever? This is so important to get right, and so many people don't think about this and just start building a product. And that's really, really terrible because it yields A, massive waste of time, and B, a fundamental lack of understanding of the product loop. Even if you think you have it in your head, the fact that you're probably working with another co-founder is enough for you guys to get on the same page. Literally, write that story out and figure out what you guys think is an MVP. Do not start building without this. Question? Thoughts? I'm going to assume silence is awesome here. So, great. Let's go with that. Okay, so the next idea that I'll talk about is how to vet the idea. This is a silly pun. But it's really important to make sure that you're not the only one that thinks your idea is amazing. And again, as engineers, your inclination is going to go and like, hey, let's just go build a damn thing. All right? So I'm going to tell you, this is actually how the product funnel looks. The last thing people look at is your product. The first thing people look at is how the hell to even get to your product, which typically starts with an ad or you sending an email to your friends and family saying, hey, I've been working on this side thing, please check it out. That will then result in people going to your website or going to the store and downloading something, which will then result in people signing up, or going in, and then, of course, finding value and using your product. But most people jump into, let's assume somebody has the app and they're using it, how would they use it? That's like not the right way to do this, because what happens is this in itself requires massive testing. We at Pulse probably do like between 5 and 10 variations of our ads on a weekly basis to figure out who's the winner and continually set A through Z, or A through J at least, tests of these ads, figure out the winner, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. We're continually refining what is the messaging, how do we rise above the noise, how do we reach the audience and do so at scale successfully. You need to optimize costs. It's not just Facebook, it's not just Twitter, it's not just LinkedIn, especially for B2B. It is super expensive. Let me give you an example. If you guys are selling to, let's say, the head of sales in a business, how much do you think it costs today to run an ad against the head of sales? You're bored here, so I'm going to ask you. How much do you think it costs to run an ad against the head of sales? Throw a number. Between 0 and 100.
75.
75. Any others?
25.
25. 200. 200. 200 is actually closer to the truth. I was misleading with the 0 to 100, I'm sorry. 200 is closer to the truth. $200 on LinkedIn to get a click. This is not even somebody signing up. This is somebody clicking to your website. All right? If you are lucky and your website is amazing and they love what you do, you're going to get a 10% conversion. That means you've spent $2,000 already at this point before you're able to talk to one person. Okay? And this person hasn't even seen your product yet. And you've spent all this time building the product for no reason. Don't do it. The best way to launch a company is to launch with ads. Don't even build a website. Send out the email to like, hey, we're building this thing. How many of you are excited about this? Create a sign-up list or just reply and say, yes, I'm interested. Build that list first. Figure out how to get to your market at scale. Whether it's B2C, whether it's B2B, especially if it's B2B, figure out how you're going to go to market. If you don't have that, you don't have success. If you have that, you have the beginnings of success. There are lots of ways of doing this. You can scout on LinkedIn. You can pretend you're eager young students that want to learn and get feedback, which hopefully some of you are, and go and ask people for, hey, I'm building this thing, would you be open enough to give me feedback? And most people will say no. But some will say, yes, you need to do this enough times. Before you build a single product, you need to have 100 customer interviews. All right, 100, B2C or B2B, doesn't matter. 100. When you have that, then you have what it takes to go build a product. The question is, what do you show them if you don't have the product? Well, if you're familiar with companies like InVision, Balsamiq, or even Keynote and PowerPoint and Google Slides, you can actually go and build mocks that look and feel like the real product, but isn't actually the real product. And that is way cheaper and way faster than you building something out. Because you're not going to get it right in your first iteration, probably not even the 10th one. Once you do that, and your ads are working, and people care about what you're doing, then build a sign-up flow on your website and measure conversion. Our first day at Pulse, we had 0 ads. We started, we had about 100 clicks a day, nobody signing up. We finally really tested the crap out of this and got to a point where our funnel is 100 people click our ads, 30 people will actually convert, and 10 to 15 will become active users. Which is pretty good, not great. I think it can be way better and we're working on it. But at least we've figured this out and we've unblocked enough to have some mass there and actually build up a real community. It's not easy. So in B2B businesses. How many of you, by the way, want to build B2B businesses versus B2C? Good. B2B is going to be far easier to do, which is why I think Shul wanted me to talk about this as well. B2B is far easier to do because you know who the buyer is, and you can very specifically identify that person or those people and go after them and get feedback. B2C is really hard to do unless you're again able to nail out that specific audience. But very often companies, or at least people when they're starting off a company, they're like, I want to build this thing that's going to be awesome for everyone. And the problem with it being awesome for everyone is it results in being awesome for no one. Google does this all the time, all the time. Every single app that Google has launched has basically sucked, minus Google Photos, because they build this product for everyone. I think 10, 15 years ago, they built like an email replacement thing. I forget what it's called. Huge launch, right? Millions of users signing up. Nobody had any idea what to do with it. Died. And a company like Google does this all the time because they don't fundamentally understand that what it takes is writing that story, figuring out the use case, who you're building it for is super important. It's just a bunch of engineers saying, hey, let's go do something cool. And that's awesome. A lot of the times it works. A lot of the time it doesn't work. Google can afford these bets. You guys can't. Any questions on this? On what it takes, especially on the B2C side, or B2B side, sorry. Yes?
So how do you convince people to sign up on your website once they click through
The ad?
for this funnel? And then how you increase the conversion rate? So at first you mentioned there's no one signed up.
Yeah, so this is super important to get right. Website actually, so there are a lot of ways to do this. I would say companies like Intercom and Drift are doing a really good job in making sure that every visitor who comes to your site has a way to chat with you and to talk to you in a way that static websites don't. Most of the time, you think your website is super clear, what you're talking about is super clear. It turns out the users don't feel that way. And they go to a static site, they're like, I don't understand this, I'm leaving. What Intercom, Drift, and some of the others do is help you chat with the user, figure out why they're here, and that helps a lot. Point one. Point two is when you build these ads, you're going to say very specific things in those ads. For example, you might put a picture of a really cool car and say like, hey, would you want a car like this? When somebody clicks that ad and goes to your website, make sure that same car image is on your site too. Make sure the continuity of the message, the position, is actually somewhat of a smooth journey. You don't want to open the door and be like, what the hell did I walk into? It should be something that's expected based on what you're selling to them. Both of those points made a huge difference for us. 3 is actually performance. We had huge assets and like really ridiculous things, and we were not mobile optimized either, all of which hurt us. But that's on the tech side. That's easier to take care of. The first 2 made a big difference for us. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thanks.
Great. Yes?
Can you talk about like initially how you go about choosing between like the messaging and positioning, like how you like brainstorm on what would work and stuff like that? Because obviously like testing is super important.
Yeah.
So, like how do you know like what to test?
Yeah. Great question. So there are companies that actually do this for you as well. So the way we started this was we had a thesis. I had a couple of good buddies that were CIOs themselves. I just called them up and said, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Does it sort of resonate? That was a good enough base point to start. If you don't have that, then drop everything you're doing, go to LinkedIn, and get to a point where you've had like 2 to 3 real conversations over the phone. Like, hey, this is what we're thinking. Is this real at all? How much of this resonates? What is important is at the end of those conversations to get them to repeat back to you what is valuable. And take those words verbatim, and that becomes your first ad campaign. CIOs say they want to learn from each other. That's what Pulse is. Whatever you're building, sales experts say the next CRM has to be more visual. That's what we are. We're a visual CRM. Awesome. Then that becomes your first ad campaign. What you do after that is you can use a ton of companies. There's Metadata as one of them. I know the guy, Gil, is the founder there. He's really good. But they automatically create variations of these messaging positionings for you and help you figure out which ads are converting best. But once you have that beginning point, you can either use technology or continue to brainstorm as you do customer interviews, continually get them to repeat back what they find valuable. Coming from their mouth, it will mean a lot more than when you talk about it.
And then also, what's like just like from experience, what's the most like cost efficient, like time efficient channel to like kind of test this initially?
Facebook.
Facebook.
Yeah. Whether B2C or B2B, Facebook. Other than your own contact list. like start with your like friends and family. If that doesn't scale or get you the answers, then definitely Facebook. Facebook's ability to target by title is just unparalleled, and their cost effectiveness also just unreal. More questions? Cool. I'm assuming you guys are familiar with like the tech stack here and how to set these up. But world-class conversion for B2C this is measured in cents, not dollars. This is measured in double, like 20, 30, 40%. And this is measured in like B2C success is you have 50% retention at the end of 10 weeks. Right? Like if you have those kind of metrics, you have success. B2B success is when you can interview someone and they'll tell you, hey, this is how I'm going to convince my boss that we need to buy this. So B2B success is, again, when you get on the phone, they will tell you, hey, this is how I'm going to justify this purchase. This is how I'm going to justify how much money I can spend on this. When you get people repeatedly telling you, this is how I'm going to justify, you have product market fit. All right, so that's on the B2C and B2B side. Questions there? Cool. So this is stuff we talked about already, which is design first, do not build, debug based on the designs, not on actual code, and defend a case, especially true for B2B, and get to a point where at least 30 to 40% of your audience that you talk to is saying, this is how I'm going to buy your product, this is how I can justify buying your product. When you have that, you guys have product market fit, you should go out and get a drink and then go start building the product. I beat myself to this. The other two things actually to talk about in B2B, so this we already talked about. This is the main thing. If you take nothing else from this presentation, do this for B2B. How much would they pay for this? They're going to give you a range, and your price point should be higher than their uncomfortable range. They're going to lowball mostly. And with B2B, what's interesting is when we started selling our first surveys, we were pricing it at 500. And our investor was like, dude, you're never going to make money with this. Why don't you go and double it? And so the challenge that he put before us was, I want you to double the price every single sales call. And that's hard to do because you're like, holy cow, I just want money right now. So anyone that wants to give me $500, I'll take. And we did it, at the cost of losing customers, because we want to see how much do they need this? How valuable is this to them? We doubled from 500 to 1,000, still no flinch, to 2,000, still no flinch, to 5,000, still no flinch, to 10,000, and that's what we're at today. From 500 to 10,000 over the last 3 months. And this is only because our investor was like, you should go double that. And that's some of the things you'll see in B2B sales, which is far easier to do, especially when you're selling to enterprise, is you can do that because the economics that they're seeing on the other side is not cost plus, which is probably how you're thinking about this. Cost plus being, how much does this cost me to make it? Can I sell it at a little bit of a premium? The value that they're seeing is value minus. How much money is this saving me or making me? And how can I reduce from there? And that's the price that I'm willing to pay. Make sense? So that's number 2. Number 3 is their commitment to buy. This is critical for fundraising. As you guys are doing these LinkedIn conversations and as you guys are talking to your friends and family, ask them at the end, don't be shy, don't hold back. You are the best salesman for your company. Do not hold back. All right, so just ask them like, hey, if we go build this, would you be comfortable buying this? And if enough people say yes, again, you have PM fit, but beyond that, you can also use them as references. Back to my original pitch to you, we've talked to 100 customers, 18 of them have said yes to buying this, is a huge sign. That is huge. That you have people that are saying, yes, I will go buy this product, and are committing to it and are referenceable. When somebody calls them, they'll say, yes, I had this conversation. VCs love that stuff because they know that you've actually done the homework. This is the most difficult part of PM Fit. A lot of people shy away from asking for money just because they're not sure, they're not confident. It's the first thing you should do in B2B sales as soon as you nail value is how much is this worth? Don't be shy. B2C, it comes later. Personally, I'm a B2C guy myself. Like it sort of kills me to build B2B companies, like sucks away at my soul a little bit. But the monetization and the revenue on the other side is just unparalleled. I mean, you saw the Salesforce trajectory that these guys shared. You will not see that in normal B2C companies. Most B2C companies go like this and then die. It's super hard to make money in B2C companies because you're fighting attention, like you're fighting for the attention economy. In B2B, you're not fighting for the attention economy. You're fighting for, you need this to run your bloody business. So like, let's talk. And there, SaaS makes sense, recurring revenue makes sense. It's almost like once you buy, it's very difficult to pull out of it, depending on what you're actually selling to them. B2C churns super quickly. So as sort of unsexy as it is sometimes to sell insurance to real estate brokers, there's a lot of money in that. And don't shy away from unsexy businesses because the opportunity on the other side is tremendous. All right. I want to talk a little bit about this. I'm not sure how relevant this is, so maybe I'll skip it. How many of you have co-founders here? Or like when you build a company, you want to have co-founders. Okay, so this is super important. First of all, I love having a co-founder. For me, building a startup is like a roller coaster of emotions. I wake up super happy. I have a bad customer call. I'm super depressed. We have a good customer call. I'm really happy again. And this happens like 10 times a day. I need someone to balance me out on the other side. That's not my wife because she would literally divorce me if I go back to her with these stories every day. So my co-founder becomes this emotional dampener for me. Like they actually keep me normalized, which is huge for me. And so when you have a partner in crime, it's really important to talk and have difficult conversations. I mean, as a founder, you're going to have difficult conversations anyways, firing people, hiring people. This is one of the most difficult. I'm very much in the boat of split equity down the center. Unless somebody brings a massive advantage with them, like 20 years experience and the first 20 customers that you'll ever get come from their Rolodex, it doesn't make sense to like say 55-45, 60-40, none of that makes sense. Just keep it clean and you guys will be happier and healthier for it. But do not delay this conversation. Especially don't delay it if you guys are doing well, but also don't delay it even if you're not doing well. It doesn't matter. Like just have this day one, look, we're going to work together. Let's just do 50-50. If there are 3 of you, then a third each. More than 3 founders gets a little bit weird. Would not recommend it. But yeah, questions on this? All right. This is pretty standard too. When you start a company, you have a 100% pool, carve 20% of it aside to hire employees. When you hire your first employee, you're going to be paying maybe 1 to 2% equity. By the time you hire your 10th employee, you're measuring not in percent, you're measuring in the actual thousands of shares. When you guys go and get jobs, because some of you will go and get jobs, just understand what those thousands of shares are worth. Companies are very reticent to actually disclosing how much that's worth or what percent that actually represents, but you should know it, for one. And for two, you should do the math around how much money you'll make if the company does well. And three, you should know how much tax you'll owe if the company does well. And a lot of people don't think about this. Number 3, regardless of being a founder or an employee, you have to pay tax on your upside. I'll give you an example. Let's say you work at a company that's worth $100 million and they give you some equity and you've been at it for 3 years. Now the company's worth $1 billion. All right? You're on your way out. First thing is you have to buy your equity. That is really, really expensive. You're buying a little piece of a company that was valued at $100 million. Unless you do this as like the 4 or 5 years that you've been there, doing one lump sum in the end is going to be really expensive. Just make sure like you've carved aside for that. 2, you're going to pay tax on that immediately. And the tax you're paying is the valuation jump from 100 million to 1 billion instantly. That is a lot of money, guys. All right, so just make sure you stay ahead of that curve. You understand what equity means, both as a founder and as an employee. Go do your homework. This is freely available on Google. And again, if you have questions, ping me. But I think between Shua and all the resources you have here, this should be fairly clear. A lot of people don't do this homework and get screwed later. Don't be one of those. Okay, to raise or to not raise. I think this question is really important for a lot of people because a lot of people, when they actually build a business, don't need money. If you look at everything around you right now, people who manufactured these chairs or these blackboards or these projectors probably didn't raise money for their business. and they're fairly successful. They probably do like 10, 20, $30 million in sales. They don't need to raise money. Some of them go public without ever raising money. That's amazing. If your business doesn't need to raise money, don't raise money. This is not like, just because other people are doing it doesn't mean you need to do it. This is not like a cool thing to do is, hey, everybody else is raising money. Everybody has a unicorn. Like, you're going to build your own company. Don't be swayed by what other people are doing. If you don't need money, do not raise it. The best way to build a business is being cash flow positive, especially if it's a B2B business. And that's 100% doable from day zero. Tech Validate, I'll give you an example. Really simple company. They run surveys. Survey company goes to a company like Dell and says, hey, Dell, you guys have a ton of customers, but most of them are not vocal about how awesome Dell is. We're going to use our surveys to survey your customers and tell them or ask them to tell us how awesome Dell is through our surveys. All right, so Dell says, okay, that sounds good. We can use that for our website and marketing. Tech Validate, zero money raised. We're doing $20 million in business. They sold to SurveyMonkey for $120 million. Those guys made a lot of money, post-IPO as well. And the head of Tech Validate is now the chief product officer at SurveyMonkey. Zero money raised. If you don't need to raise money, do not do it. It's a waste of your equity, and that's somebody else making money off of you. So when do you do it? You only need to raise money if your business can justify VC economics. And what I mean by that is you can actually 10x your business in a meaningful time frame, maybe like 2 years, and it's at least $100 million business, all right, in revenue. Model this out. It's not hard to model it out. Most businesses are actually not a $100 million business. Unless you're confident that you can get there, you're wasting your time and the VC's time. Questions? Cool. All right. Okay, so some useful tips. Do not compare. A lot of companies look at like Instagram, and they're like, holy cow, my business is not like Instagram. What am I doing wrong? Your business is never going to be like Instagram unless you're very fortunate or a genius or some combination of the two, and timing and luck plays a part. Just do not compare. Don't get up and say like, why am I not doing as well as this other person that's in the limelight? The press doesn't cover 99% of companies that are not doing well, if not 100% of them. The press only covers the 1 or 0.1% that are doing extremely well. Do not benchmark yourself against that. You'll see this everywhere you go, on billboards, on LinkedIn. Do not fall prey to that. It'll just depress you and everyone around you as a result as well. Jewel Labs is another example. Anyone familiar with Jewel here? Probably everyone. Yeah, so if your company is selling drugs to kids, you're going to do super well. But outside of that, do not compare yourself to these companies. It's not interesting. It's not meaningful. Second, I already talked a lot about this, is when you build your first story, print it, put it somewhere you can see it every day. Because there are going to be times when you're like, I don't know why I'm doing this. My buddy has a job at Google. He's earning like $250K. My other buddy has a job at Uber. She just went IPO and is going to make so much money and has this house on like Presidio. What the hell am I doing with my startup earning $60K a year? This story is going to help you. Getting up and saying like, this is what I want to bring to life is going to help you. And if you find yourself one day not moved by that story, you shouldn't be running your startup. Give the capital back and go get a job. Because if that story is not compelling enough, you're not going to be motivated. Like that should be the last day of your company. Okay, before I get into this, questions, yes?
So for companies don't raise money,
Yeah.
how do they hire people? I mean, the co-founders can probably live on their savings, but
Not a hard thing to do. It's a mindset that you need to be in. Most people have this like, well, I have a company, I'm going to create a deck, I'm going to go raise some VC funding, and then I'm going to go build it out. That's not the way it should be. The company should be formed by, I have an idea, I'm going to validate it with customers, and I'm going to get them to buy my software, and then go build it, and have them fund my building of the software, and then go make that happen. If that is your mindset, you can make it happen. If that is not your mindset, it will never happen. So the question about hiring, it will happen because you will be cash flow positive. And by the way, when you are cash flow positive, raising VC becomes that much easier. So definitely doable. unless you're building something really crazy like, all right, I'm going to send robots to the moon for delivering pizzas, then you need a lot of capital, and like, yes, you need to go raise VC. But for a lot of software, you actually don't need to do that.
So it's better to raise money from a customer instead of raising money from a VC.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And actually, a lot of them sometimes will want equity in your business as well and want to participate in the upside because they're helping you mature the software. A lot of companies do this. Facebook does this all the time, where they actually invest in a company and say, if you build a mature solution, not only will we use it, but here's money up front for you to go build it. Tim Campos was the CIO there. He did this all the time for B2B companies.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yes.
Yesterday and 2 days ago happened to be YC Demo Day. I happened to get a chance to like go through companies, and like I saw there are a lot of like B2B companies, and their founders all have like histories in the industry, or they have like extended knowledge. And I mean, you have worked in B2B from the beginning, so you know like there's what problem there are in the field. But how do you break into B2B business as an undergraduate?
Yeah.
Because, you know, like mostly you're exposed to like Instagram or stuff like that.
Very good question. Yeah, so I think definitely the best ideas have come from people who've experienced the pain themselves and want to go solve for it. And a lot of the companies coming out of YC fall in that bucket of, hey, when I was at Microsoft, I saw this challenge, therefore I left and I'm starting a company. As an undergraduate, the best way to do this is to actually go and do internships at these companies. And in my undergraduate, I was fortunate enough to actually do about 7 internships coming out. So I did 2 every summer. I also extended them through the course of my semester. I did the same thing at Wharton as well, which was super helpful. But the more exposure you can get to real world, how companies work, and do this through like, Series A, Series B, Series C, and public companies. Companies are really excited and hungry to work with interns, especially coming out of a place like this. And you guys are super smart and so motivated. People are going to be really interested in working with you. So take advantage of that, but that's going to be the next way. The last one I would say is, take problems that you experience yourself and think about what the solutions for that is. That's how companies like Postmates started on food delivery takes so long. What am I doing here? And Postmates is seen as a B2C company, but it actually is a B2B2C company. It has to work with these businesses to then deliver the food to the actual customers and consumers. So even an experience that you guys have yourself as, I wish this was better, is a great starting point to say, is there a business in here? And then think about the supply chain and the logistics around, could this be B2B? Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
Just wonder, how do you convince the IT team from enterprise to maybe just to try your products, given that you don't have a lot of exposure to this area, or maybe they have a very high switching cost from their existing products to your product?
Yeah.
So it seems to me the barrier to enter is pretty high in the B2B.
Yeah, definitely it can be. I think the barrier to entry is high and the reward on the other side is high. But the way to do that, in my opinion, is to understand what problem you're solving. If you can state the problem and that resonates, then there is a solution to be had for it. Even, for example, and this is a sort of a bad example because it's Microsoft versus Salesforce. Neither of them are actually startup-y. But Salesforce is a very entrenched CRM player, right? CRM is basically how you keep record of all your customers. And Microsoft is now coming in and taking a lot of market share from Salesforce. The reason is twofold. Salesforce usage has been statistically low in the past because people don't like using Salesforce. It's a cumbersome tool. But more than that, sales guys just don't like using it. And 2 is that it's really expensive. The second one is the reason Microsoft came in and said, hey, Salesforce is really expensive. We're just going to undercut them. In some cases, just give it away for free and win market share through that. So the problem they identified was Salesforce is really expensive. We can help you save some money, and you go with that. Generally, it comes down to 3 things. You either save money, you either make money, or you make someone look good. And usually it's number 3. That is the reason they buy, and they justify it by saying, hey, look how much money we saved, or look how much money we're making. But the reason to buy is very definitely emotional. So if you can make someone look good, then they will justify it whatever way it takes. But identify the problem, identify how you're going to make them look good, and that'll be your first B2B sale, I think. Other questions, guys? I did.
Was it worth getting the MBA and like kind of like the money spent, the time spent, like
Yeah.
startup guys, like was it worth actually doing those extra 2 years?
Great question. So first, I met my wife there, so yes, worth it for me. But beyond that, I think one of the things that made Cool Iris successful was my co-founder, who was an MBA from University of Chicago, could literally pick up the phone and be like, okay, great, I have a meeting with the VP of Yahoo now. Hey, great, I have this meeting with the director at Google now. And the reason is he'd created that network while at University of Chicago. And building out that network so that you have contacts in almost every industry or company you can think of, there's no better way of doing this than business school. Because people have actually matured, people have jobs coming into business school, they've typically had some impact, and they're going to go on to do really crazy, awesome things as well. So that network makes it really worthwhile. But if your startup is already successful and you're kicking ass, then you don't need to do it. It's also very often a good way to switch careers. So if you're in finance, you want to leave finance and get into tech, then it's a great way to transition. But yeah, if you come out and you create a company, then you don't need it. Cool. All right, final thing on B2B versus B2C is when you start this company, you need to be really passionate about it. It goes back to what I said in sort of slide 0 or 1. If you don't want to wake up and feel bored about why am I selling like insurance to brokers, then don't start a B2B business. B2B businesses are seen fundamentally as somewhat boring just because they're slower moving, sales are slower, takes longer process, but the success rates for B2B companies, tremendous. It's probably a magnitude greater than B2C companies, right? So in spite of that, you guys need to be excited about it. When you write that story and you read it over and over and over, and it just feels like this is not something I want to invest in, then walk away. I would say that's the biggest difference between these two is this is much slower, but much higher chance of success, much faster to fail, and if it is successful, like way faster success, but like terrible chances here. Yes?
From the B2B end, like just the sales cycle, for example, like I know there's always like kind of a choice you have to make between like choosing like low-hanging fruit of like kind of like small or medium-sized companies and like really big ones, like pretty much leaders in the space. Like what like insights do you have on that? Like what you should choose?
Yeah.
Like when you're making that decision, like should I go with the guy who like will give me a few $100, or should I just take a huge like 6-month, 8-month sales cycle and sell to like the actual huge enterprise?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the question here. If you have the VC economics behind you to justify a 6 to 8 month cycle, and you can get 100K at the end of that, that's a really great way to go. But I would say most successful companies that are coming out, especially in the SaaS business, are trying to shorten their cycles. They need to be in the 3 to 6 month cycle to be really amazingly successful. There are exceptions in both cases, but generally the more you can sell over a phone or even off the internet directly, those kind of businesses do super well. A lot of the IPOs coming up this year are those kind of businesses. So Zendesk is actually a great example where they have a lot of premium sales, but the way they got started was a sort of bottom-up approach. NetSuite, another great example. They were just acquired, but they started bottom-up. They built up just a ton of users at the bottom, ton of customers using them, paying them pennies, and that kind of momentum is huge. Because churn was one of the slides that came up here. Churn is when you lose customers. If you have 6 customers that are paying you 100K each, and one of them churns, you've lost a lot of revenue. If you have 600 customers, and even 10 of them churn, doesn't mean anything. So it's way better to go bottom up and get those smaller checks than to think about.
What about stuff like kind of just like upkeep and like making sure that like these customers are like satisfied too? Because obviously, like working with 6 people rather than one person is a lot. Like 6 is a lot harder than working with one person. Like there's obviously more people involved in the situation there, and also like some of these smaller players might not be like your perfect customer.
Yeah.
Like your perfect like archetype that you want to be selling to. So like how do you choose between that too?
Yeah, so let me answer the second question first. The perfect customer doesn't exist for the first few sales that you do because they're actually telling you how to build your product. Nobody's going to take your product as is and implement it. What you don't want to do is start building a product that's only useful for that one customer. And that's a really fine line you need to start straddling is, hey, is what I'm building only going to be useful for Google? And then you need to make a decision. Like, hey, they're going to pay us $6 million. It's worth it for this year or not. The reason Salesforce was successful is not only because they moved away from CDs, but they built one product. And they actually walked away from a ton of deals early on that were like, can you customize Salesforce for fitting my needs? Like, no, we can't do that, because when it comes time to upgrade our software, we don't want to have 20 people start complaining because we didn't account for their specific use case or how they customize the product. Customizing the product leads to death of innovation. That's why you'll see a lot of big companies like SAP and Oracle moving really slowly, because everyone bought SAP, but it's not the same product. Everyone makes it their own product, and before you know it, it's like a custom-built thing. So as much as possible, build one product and sell to that, and bottom-up will help you do that. Because when you have 20, 30 customers, you will automatically walk away from the 21st who says, can you do this tweak for me? You're going to be like, no, I'm just going to get the 22nd guy who doesn't want that tweak. And that way you're building a true software company, not a services company. So I very much lean toward the bottom-up approach over top-down. Yes?
So like you mentioned that you interned like seven different companies.
Yes.
And are they all like in startups company or like bigger corporations that like
Yeah.
how did those experiences make you decide to like go into startup instead of like working at a big name company?
Yeah, so again, I couldn't work at a big name company. I didn't have the GPA to do that, so I was unable to. But the way I got those internships is I actually just work for free for a lot of them. So I think 5 out of the 7 were actually unpaid. Ubisoft finally took some pity on me and paid me a little bit, and I was a QA guy there, so that was a great internship. I basically played games for a living for like 3 months. But the others, I essentially just like kept walking into places, using my contacts and saying like, how can I work here? What is it that I can do for you guys that's going to be helpful? And in the meantime, like, how can you train me to be a better sort of citizen of this corporate? Like, what does it mean to be a good citizen here? What kind of work are you guys doing? And train me on your model. That was really helpful. Getting that exposure was tremendous. And it wasn't easy. I think for about every 50 conversations, I had about 5 people that said yes. So you'll see the same odds, 1 in 10, 1 in 20. But you only need one person to say yes. So the other 19 don't matter. Yeah. Yes?
What was the product that you launched for your first startup, and what were the challenges you faced with this hardware business as opposed to the software business?
Software. Hardware is difficult because it's really expensive to create. It's also really expensive to maintain, and upgrades are basically non-existent. So the hardware we created, we had 3 products initially. One was when it's raining, your windows will close automatically so that rain doesn't come inside the house. The second is using fingerprints to enter the house. So instead of keys that can be lost or stolen, use a fingerprint, come in. And the third product is because you're using a fingerprint, we'll know who you are and we can customize the house to you. So lights and music and temperature and all this stuff, it'll play your voicemail. Back then voicemail was a thing. And so those are the 3 products that we launched with. They all basically failed because people didn't have the trust of saying like, we're gonna trust this young company to run our entire house. And like if any of their stuff fails, suddenly lights are gonna go on and like it'll become super hot or cold. So eventually we realized we had to come up with a really simple product that didn't affect the whole house. It was a mirror TV. And basically it was a 2-way mirror with a TV behind it and a sensor behind it. So when somebody walked in front of it, it converted from being a mirror to being a TV at the bottom and the mirror on top. And then we started doing contextual stuff there. So in the bathroom, we would show you while you're brushing your teeth or whatever, like the news, traffic for the day, that kind of stuff. In elevators, we started showing ads for like restaurants nearby, especially during lunchtime, that kind of thing. And that's what really made us a revenue and got us going. But hardware was hard because of the supply chain. A lot of our stuff came from Asia because of the firmware, which is the software that runs the hardware. A lot of that came from Asia as well, and the quality that we were dealing with from Singapore and India in particular was not that great. And the third was upgrades were just ridiculous. Like to convince someone to spend another $1,000 or $10,000 to replace their hardware is crazy. Apple's done an amazing job, by the way. Like I don't know how many people are Apple users here, but every 2 years they convince you to spend another $1,000 in a phone. That's not easy to do. Most hardware companies struggle with that. And that's what our biggest struggle was. Software, it's instant. You're done. Like you're all on the latest version of Gmail, whether you like it or not. And that's pretty cool. Where we're only serving technology experts for now. So tech experts can ask questions. Tech experts can basically answer questions and learn from each other. The question that we're grappling with is how do we expand from tech only to the rest of the world in a way that doesn't mess up the product, doesn't dilute the experience for the tech executives, but still enables us to become this platform play longer term. So that's from a product perspective a really interesting challenge for us right now, which we don't have a solution for. When and how do we let CTOs in, CFOs in, students in? Don't know yet. So we're still figuring that out.
Well, wouldn't that just become like another Reddit? Or
Maybe, but Reddit, the thing is, like, you don't have polls there, right? You can't go out there and like guaranteed get 100 moms to respond and tell you if they're going to vote for Trump or not, right? Like, we want to build a platform where it allows you to reach anyone and get answers that you're seeking in real time. And even from a product perspective, like, how great would it be if you could validate your idea about the B2B company would say, like, I wish I could get 500 product managers to tell me if they would buy this product. Here's a screenshot of the idea. Would you buy this, yes or no? Not possible. On Reddit, on Google, on Quora, it doesn't really matter. Just not possible. So how do we extend a product where all of you can just pick up your phone, ask this question, reach random people at the edge of the world and get the answers you're looking for to understand how they think about the world and make better decisions through that. Not easy to do, but yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to dominate conversation.
That's cool.
Have you thought about like using decentralization or like maybe blockchain to enable that kind of engagement?
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of how
We
by
did.
engaging in the community. You can
Right,
actually-
you earn and like you become a good citizen.
Yeah.
We did. We just didn't have the resources to actually do blockchain and like build it off of a blockchain stack. And so we decided to stay away from that when blockchain was hot. And of course, a lot of the hype has died down now. So TBD on what the stable version of blockchain looks like. We did think about it, but it was just too expensive for us at that time. Yeah, good suggestion though. Cool. I think I've bored you guys enough here. If there are no more questions, I will thank you for paying attention somewhat, most of you. Yeah, appreciate your time. Thanks so much, guys.